For most of naval history, ships fighting other ships on the surface has been the only kind of combat. Since the introduction of gunpowder in the 14th century, combat involved the use of guns. Gun-armed warships reached their ultimate form in the mighty battleships of World War I and World War II. But battleships were not the only vessels optimized for combat on the surface of the ocean. Smaller than the battleship, the cruiser was a fast, powerfully armed, but lightly armored warship, ideal for long-range operations and commerce protection. Very large cruisers with battleship armament were known as battle cruisers. One step down from the cruiser was the destroyer. Small, fast vessels designed to intercept high-speed torpedo-armed craft, and originally known as torpedo boat destroyers. By World War II, the destroyer had more than doubled in size compared to those which had been used in the Great War. They generally operated in small groups, known as flotillas, and often served with larger fleet units as scouts. They carried a reasonably heavy gun armament, together with torpedoes, which were used to make multiple attacks on enemy surface units. They were also used to hunt submarines, as they were armed with depth charges. Smaller destroyers, first known as escort destroyers or destroyer escorts, specialized in protecting convoys, primarily from submarine attack. These small destroyers eventually came to be known as frigates. In some navies, the smallest ocean-going escort vessels were known as corvettes or sloops. Finally, for short-range and coastal operations, most navies developed a series of small, extremely fast torpedo boats. When used in large numbers in enclosed waters, they could even threaten capital ships. Even as they reached their zenith, the classic battleships were becoming obsolete. In the 20th century, the submarine and the aircraft carrier grew more important, at the expense of the battleship. Battleships were used to carry heavy anti-aircraft armament for the protection of aircraft carriers, and for the most part, their massive guns were restricted to shore bombardment. In the 1980s, however, the battleship saw a brief renaissance when the U.S. Navy revived the 4 Iowa-class vessels. They were fitted with a heavy anti-ship and land attack missile armament and saw action in the First Gulf War. But the battleship proved to be an expensive luxury, too costly even for the U.S. Navy. Smaller surface vessels, cruisers, destroyers, and frigates, took on its missions. The difference between cruisers, destroyers, and frigates today is primarily one of size, though in the past, it was also one of function. During the Cold War, cruisers and destroyers were generally considered to be anti-aircraft platforms, while frigates were tasked with hunting down and destroying submarines. In the post-Cold War world, enemy threats are less clear, and every combat vessel needs some kind of capability against any kind of threat. The traditional gun-armed cruiser proved as obsolete as the battleship following World War II. Although they were used for shore bombardment in the Korean War, by the 1960s, they had been replaced by missile-armed vessels, whose primary mission was fleet air defense. The first major series of purpose-built guided missile cruisers was the Leahy class, commissioned in the early 1960s. The 9 vessels were capable of supporting carrier or battleship battle groups and amphibious forces. They can also operate independently and as flagships of surface action groups. The 9 conventionally powered fleet escort cruisers of the Belknap class that followed were built in the early 1960s and decommissioned in the early 1990s. Each ship had one twin-arm launcher for Terrier surface-to-air missiles and ASROC anti-submarine rockets, and its fire control capability allowed 2 simultaneous engagements. The introduction of nuclear-powered aircraft carriers in the 1960s and 1970s added considerably to the U.S. Navy's ability to project power. Nuclear-powered warships could easily undertake long-distance operations, though they still had to be replenished with consumables such as weapons and food. The USS Long Beach was the U.S. Navy's first nuclear-powered surface ship. It was designed as an anti-aircraft escort for the nuclear-powered supercarrier, the USS Enterprise. Long Beach was followed by the Bainbridge, which is essentially a nuclear-powered development of the conventionally powered Leahy class. Intended as an escort for carrier battle groups, the ship was armed with 2 twin-arm launchers for Terrier surface-to-air missiles. It could also undertake 4 simultaneous engagements with 4 missile guidance radars. Given its size and command facilities, this 9,100-ton ship was often used as an admiral's flagship. The Bainbridge was decommissioned in September 1996. The U.S. Navy's 3rd nuclear-powered fleet escort cruiser, the Truxtun, was a development of the Belknap class. The missile armament and fire control systems were those of the Belknap-class ships, and the nuclear power plant provided a speed of 31 knots. The ship was decommissioned in September 1995 as one of the peace dividends that followed the end of the Cold War in the late 1980s. The most advanced of the nuclear-powered cruisers, and also the most costly, were 2 vessels of the California class and the 4 Virginia-class cruisers. Designed for pairing with the nuclear-powered aircraft carrier, the South Carolina was the second of the 2 nuclear-powered fleet escort cruisers of the California class. This 10,150-ton ship was capable of more than 30 knots and was armed defensively with 2 5-inch guns and 4 single launchers for 16 lightweight anti-submarine torpedoes. The offensive capability was vested in 1 octuple launcher for 24 ASROC anti-submarine rockets and 2 single-arm launchers for 80 standard surface-to-air missiles. The single-arm launchers were used in conjunction with a digital fire control system, able to handle 2 interceptions simultaneously. There was no embarked helicopter, but an operating platform was fitted over the stern. The Californias were followed by the Virginias, which were similar in size, but which used 2 twin-arm missile launchers and 2 or 3 guidance radars. Nuclear power proved to be an extremely expensive option, and the Virginia class were followed into service by the gas turbine-powered CG-47, or Ticonderoga class of guided missile cruisers. Based on the hull design of the large Spirance-class destroyer, the gas turbine-powered Ticonderogas are the most advanced air defense vessels in the world. Built around the powerful SPY-1 radar of the Aegis air defense system, the class can fire standard surface-to-air missiles, Tomahawk and Harpoon surface attack missiles, and ASROC anti-submarine missiles. The Aegis weapon system is an advanced combat, control, and information system that uses powerful computers and radars to track and destroy enemy targets. Known as the Shield of the Fleet, the high-powered radar can deal with over hundreds of targets simultaneously and can search, locate, track, and guide missiles out to a range of more than 100 miles. The latest versions of the system can handle up to 900 targets at a time. The first 5 ships were equipped with 2 twin missile launchers. All later vessels were completed with a 122-cell vertical launch missile system, offering a much higher rate of fire. Any escort must be both strong and able to deal with a full range of operational tasks. This means that most escort forces are based on one or more fleet escort cruisers, supported by varying numbers and proportions of fleet escort destroyers and oceanic escort frigates. Following World War II, the U.S. Navy had a massive force of destroyers in commission. However, in spite of modernization, the destroyers of the Fletcher, Sumner, and Gearing class were too small to be fitted with the latest missile systems. The U.S. Navy's first missile destroyers, the Farragut class, entered service in the late 1950s. At nearly 6,000 tons, they were twice as large as World War II-era destroyers. The 10 Farragut-class missile-armed fleet escort destroyers were decommissioned around 1990. The most important fleet escort destroyers between the late 1970s and mid-1990s were the 30 units of the Spearance class, each at 8,000 tons. The ship was developed to replace the large number of World War II-era Allen M. Sumner and Gearing-class destroyers. The type was designed for anti-submarine warfare, with ASROC rockets and one embarked helicopter, and also possessed a point defense anti-aircraft warfare missile capability. Later upgrades provided anti-ship and land attack capabilities with Harpoon and Tomahawk missiles. Known to the U.S. Navy as the sprue cans, they were the first major U.S. Navy combatant to employ gas turbine propulsion. Each ship had 4 General Electric LM2500 gas turbines, delivering a maximum 80,000 horsepower to 2 shafts for a speed of 30 knots. This arrangement proved technically reliable, comparatively economical in fuel terms, and versatile in combining good cruising endurance with a high rate of acceleration to a useful maximum speed. The arrangement was retained in the 4 basically similar Kidd-class destroyers, which were optimized for the missile-armed anti-aircraft role. The configuration was also used for the Ticonderoga class of anti-aircraft fleet escort cruisers, with a lengthened version of the Spearance-class hull. The last Spearance-class destroyers were decommissioned in 2005. These have been succeeded by the Arleigh Burke-class vessels. These are among the largest and most powerful destroyers ever built, both larger and more heavily armed than many previous cruisers. Originally intended as a cheaper variant of the Aegis cruiser, the Arleigh Burke is armed with the same SPY-1 radar as the Ticonderoga class. Far from being a cheap anti-aircraft platform, the Burke-class destroyers have evolved into highly capable multi-mission platforms with significant anti-air, anti-ship, anti-submarine, and land attack capabilities. One of the key demands of U.S. Navy combatants in the Cold War period was a high level of capability against Soviet submarines. The large fleet escort cruisers of the period between 1960 and 1990 were optimized for the air defense role, with comparatively limited anti-submarine capability. The seek-and-kill anti-submarine role was entrusted to ocean escort frigates. The most important class of such vessels from the late 1960s to the advent of the Oliver Hazard Perry class in the late 1970s was the Knox class. There were 46 of these 4,100-ton frigates. The ships had good sonar, and their offensive capability was vested in one octuple launcher for 16 ASROC anti-submarine rockets, and an embarked drone helicopter later replaced by a manned helicopter. Here, a Knox-class frigate fires an ASROC anti-submarine rocket. This was designed to release its payload over the target submarine, with the torpedo homing automatically. The rest of the armament was light, but included an octuple Sea Sparrow surface-to-air missile launcher for point defense and lightweight anti-submarine torpedoes. One of the U.S. Navy's most important but least known skills is the management of onboard crises. These can be the result of battle damage or the result of an accident. The most vulnerable aspect of the Knox-class ocean escort frigate was its single-shaft propulsion arrangement, and the boiler and engine room procedures strongly featured firefighting drills. A fire could quickly leave the frigate dead in the water. The failure to bring a fire under control quickly could result in catastrophic damage that could make the restoration of propulsive power a dockyard task. Another possibility in action is that all electric means of communication with the ship may be lost. For such an eventuality, the signalmen of all U.S. Navy warships are trained to pass rudimentary commands by means of hand signals. Otherwise known as the FFG-7 class, after the designation number of the lead ship, the 3,485-ton Oliver Hazard Perry class frigate was designed as the successor to the Knox class of larger oceanic escort frigate or destroyer escorts. The object was to create a capable type that would be cheap enough to purchase in substantial numbers. The key to the low cost was the retention of a single-shaft propulsion system and the introduction of a single-arm launcher for 40 standard surface-to-air and harpoon anti-ship missiles. The Knox class had been criticized for its lack of redundancy and the inhibitions it placed on maneuverability. These limitations were offset in part by the adoption of a get-you-home secondary propulsion system, giving 6 knots, and a missile guidance system with 2 channels for the simultaneous engagement of 2 targets. The U.S. Navy bought 51 ships. The modern surface combatant is a vessel with an overriding naval warfare role that must also be able to undertake other tasks. The tasks include protection of the country's maritime borders against illegal economic and migrant incursions, interdiction of smugglers, and support of humanitarian operations. These non-warfare tasks are the core of the U.S. Coast Guard's existence in times of peace. The more standard naval tasks are carried out when the U.S. is at war, with anti-submarine warfare a primary role. The Hamilton-class cutters were among the first U.S. surface combatants to have gas turbines as part of the propulsion arrangement for a speed of 29 knots. Each cutter also carries one 5-inch gun and 1 or 2 helicopters. As well as conventional ships' boats, the Hamilton-class cutters carry Zodiac craft, which are inflatables that can be launched very rapidly and possess both high speed and agility. One of the keys to the success of the U.S. Coast Guard, epitomized here by the Dallas of the Hamilton class, as well as of the U.S. Navy, is the advanced nature of the electronic systems carried. The masts of U.S. Coast Guard and U.S. Navy ships are covered with antennae. The antennae are associated mostly with surveillance and fire control radars, but also with communications and electronic warfare systems. The majority of illegal immigrants to the U.S. come across the land border with Mexico, which is very difficult to police in a genuinely effective manner. The maritime frontier, especially that to the south and southeast of Florida, can be policed more reliably by aircraft and ships, using radar and the eyes of trained observers. Here, the two main areas of responsibility for the defenders of the U.S.'s maritime orders are the detection and interdiction of drug smugglers and the discovery of would-be illegal immigrants. The first generally make their attempts in small aircraft and high-speed boats. The second almost invariably use slow and unreliable small craft, often not equipped with sanitary facilities and safety equipment for voyages in dangerous waters. The waters of the area are often colder than generally believed and can turn very rough with little warning, and also with great speed. When the aircraft and vessels of the U.S. Coast Guard locate such craft, the primary concern of the vessels sent to intercept or rescue the craft is the safety of their occupants. These almost always include women and children, most of them unable to swim and weakened by lack of food and water. Here, men of the U.S. Coast Guard's 3,000-ton high-endurance cutter Boatwell, operating from the base at Guantanamo Bay in Cuba, rescue Haitians located while attempting to cross by boat to the U.S. Often the task of the U.S. Coast Guard is rescue at sea, as much as the prevention of illegal immigration for economic or claimed political reasons. Given food and water, as well as medical attention and a period of rest and recuperation, the would-be refugees are transported back to Haiti. The repatriation of immigrants attempting to make an illegal entry to the U.S. is always a difficult process. The U.S. believes that a way to ease the task is to not take would-be immigrants picked up at sea to the continental U.S. for recovery. Instead, these people are delivered to the U.S. base at Guantanamo Bay in Cuba and repatriated from there. Back in Haitian waters, the refugees are landed at the capital, Port-au-Prince. This is the Chase, a sister ship of the Boatwell in the Hamilton class in the harbor of the port. The U.S. Navy has only a comparatively small force of high-endurance cutters, such as the Hamilton-class ships. Available in larger numbers are various classes of medium-endurance cutter. The 1,000-ton Dauntless, designated as WMEC 624, is a unit of the Reliance class. These diesel-powered vessels have a maximum speed of 18 knots and were designed to remain at sea about 15 days, generally within some 500 miles of the U.S. coast. The 1,800-ton Bear class, completed in the 1980s, is larger than the Reliance class. This is seen here in the form of the Forward, designated as WMEC 911. Both the Reliance and Bear class cutters have a 3-inch gun as their primary armament and possess essentially similar performance on their diesel engine propulsion arrangements. The Reliance can operate one helicopter from a platform, while the Bear also has hangar and maintenance facilities for one more modern helicopter. Though not matched in any real sense with their high-endurance counterparts, the medium-endurance cutters can make a valuable contribution to the defense of the U.S.'s maritime frontiers. The vessels of the U.S. Coast Guard are highly distinctive. They have white hulls and superstructures. U.S. Coast Guard is stenciled on their hulls, abaft the diagonal broad red stripe carrying the badge of the service, and trailed by a narrow blue stripe. This is the peacetime color scheme, which is replaced in time of war by a gray scheme based on that of the U.S. Navy. The high speed of the Hamilton-class cutters is very important in making it possible for the ships to reach the scene of any action as rapidly as possible. Each of the ships also has a retractable bow maneuvering unit, which facilitates docking and undocking. The unit is also said to be very useful in several types of oceanographic work. Oceanographic and hydrographic work is a major aspect of the U.S. Coast Guard's operational task. These members of the forward's crew are loading supplies on board their vessel. The medium-endurance cutters of this Bear class have a complement of 95 officers and other ranks, and are designed to undertake only comparatively short patrols. The high reliability of the Bear class cutters was designed into the vessels, so that they could alternate 2-month patrols with 2-month periods in port. The forward's home port is the Integrated Support Command in Portsmouth, Virginia, which is also the base for another 5 of the Bear class's 12 units, which all share the same basic tasking. The Bear cutters are a successful class. Since they were commissioned in February 1983 until late 2007, the named ship of the class has undertaken a wide assortment of missions, such as search and rescue, alien migrant interdiction, anti-drug smuggler patrols, and fishery enforcement and international engagement. Within this wide-ranging variety of tasks, the Bear has made 18 significant drug seizures, involving 12 marijuana and 6 cocaine raids. Its supplies loaded and its time in port over, the forward gets underway and heads out to sea for another of the 3 patrols it makes each year. Another unit of the Bear class of medium-endurance cutters is the Northland. Like its sister ships, the Northland had a platform large enough to handle a helicopter up to the size of the Sikorsky SH-60 Seahawk. These cutters have no embarked anti-submarine warfare sensors or weapons, but have space and weight allowances for a towed array sonar to be shipped in time of war, with the Seahawk helicopter carrying its own sonar, as well as anti-submarine weapons. The Bear-class cutters can also undertake more humanitarian missions. Here, the Northland is seen moored in the harbor of Port-au-Prince as cranes lift pallets of food from the cutter to the pier for distribution after a hurricane. Its mission successfully completed, the cutter Northland heads out to sea just after sunset. Ships and their weapons are vital, but cannot be used effectively without a skilled crew. The effective working of any warship demands the right crew, from the lowliest enlisted person to the captain. The enlisted personnel have the harder physical tasks, but their efforts can be supervised and led only by well-trained and highly motivated non-commissioned officers, chief warrant officers, and commissioned officers. Most professional U.S. Navy officers start their lives as midshipmen at the U.S. Naval Academy at Annapolis, Maryland, then become ensigns before rising up the ranks of commissioned officer. As a midshipman and ensign, the young officer must learn all about shipboard and shoreside demands. Only then can they make their mark and advance in rank. Constant vigilance and inspection are vital keys to safety and sustained operational readiness. Here, seamen undertake an inspection of the engine room of the 735-ton ocean minesweeper Elusive, underway in the Persian Gulf. Experience and training in peace help to ensure the smooth and effective functioning of the bridge crew in war or crisis. On completion of their basic training, seamen move into specialized training. Depending on the size and nature of the warship in question, specialized teams can be large or small. Larger warships inevitably demand considerably larger numbers of teams. Aircraft carriers, of course, demand two sets of teams, one dedicated to the operation of the ship, and the other to the operation of the embarked air wing. Within any team, there is an important emphasis on the maximum degree of cross-training. This means that in emergencies or when personnel are killed or wounded, another member of the team can undertake at least the core elements of that person's responsibilities. An important part of training is to make all members of the crew totally accustomed to their duty stations and the tasks they perform there. This opens the way for core tasks to be undertaken with little conscious thought, freeing the mind to listen for orders and react swiftly to any changes. High-quality, nutritious, appetizing, and readily available food is absolutely essential to performance and morale. The U.S. Marine Corps is the primary U.S. service for the projection of land force onto a hostile shore from the sea. The U.S. Navy operates a sizable number of large amphibious warfare vessels of various types. Some are optimized for the delivery of personnel, and others for the landing of equipment, such as armored fighting vehicles, artillery, and all the other heavy equipment of modern warfare. The 5 assault ships of the Tarawa class are designed to deliver and land large numbers of Marines by helicopter and landing craft. Each ship has a crew of 890 and carries 1,900 Marines. The galleys of each ship have to prepare nourishing food for almost 2,800 hard-working personnel, and then serve it quickly and efficiently in a large number of sittings. The personnel on these ships is as diverse as the U.S. population, so the cooking teams have to be able to prepare different types of food. Deep in the bowels of the ship, where it's protected by the water outside the hull, as well as by structural features, the propulsion arrangements of any warship are large and complex. The Kitty Hawk is the 81,000-ton lead ship of a 4-strong class of aircraft carriers. It is conventionally powered and can exceed 33 knots on the 280,000 horsepower delivered to its 4 shafts. The core of the propulsion arrangement is 4 sets of Westinghouse geared turbines working on the superheated steam generated by 8 Foster Wheeler boilers. These are heated by furnaces burning oil fuel. With extremely great pressures and very high temperatures as standard when the ship is moving at speed, crews have to be careful to monitor and record a large number of readings. With the steam turbines rotating at very high velocities, the crew has to ensure that the various lubrication systems are working at peak efficiency. Any warship is controlled from its bridge except under combat conditions, when the Combat Information Center is the command hub. On the bridge, COM is the order of the day. This means that the members of the bridge crew can work efficiently, and that information and orders can be received and passed without interruption. At sea, the surface combatant is a whole community of a special kind. Like the members of every other community in the world, the warship's crew members must work, but they must also rest and, wherever possible, obtain a measure of privacy. The time that the members of the crew have to relax and recuperate is as important as that in which they work and fight. Hard experience has shown that a crew that has the opportunity to rest comfortably, enjoy its recreations, and eat well when off duty will also perform when on duty and in combat. The habitability of the U.S. Navy's surface combatants is an aspect of ship design that features highly on the service's order of priorities when planning a new class. The shipboard community is connected to the rest of the world electronically, and in the case of aircraft carriers, by special transport aircraft. But physically, it is isolated. And this exerts its own psychological pressures, especially in a crowded environment. Like all of the world's other major navies, the U.S. Navy seeks to ensure that links with families are preserved as much as possible. Crew comfort is all very well, but fighting is ultimately what surface combatants are designed for. In the past, when navies were larger and many more vessels were available, it made sense to have specialized designs to tackle submerged, surface, or airborne threats.